Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone out there. We're just waiting for a few others to join. I think we just switched to just James's camera. So we're just waiting. I think there's one more to sign on, so we'll just give it another minute or two. But thank you for signing on, and we'll be back in just a second to get started.
Where did you go? You're gone.
Yeah, you put your camera on.
Because
we can see you.
There we go. There we go. Okay, I'm starting the broadcast.
Okay.
It looks like we have Greg Johnson, Elizabeth Walker, and John Sherwood.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It looks like we have, I think we have everyone we were expecting. So we'll go ahead and get started just in the interest of time, but if anybody else joins us, that's fine, they can jump in. And right now we have everybody in the muted mode. I'm just going to go through a couple of introductory slides. It'll be very quick, and then we'll end up unmuting everybody's phone, and then you'll be able to talk to anybody else. So that should start in just a minute. So there's now a logistics screen just showing you what's on the control bar for the GoToWebinar. So you can always use the little orange arrow to make your menu bar bigger or smaller. The phones for right now, as I said, were muted, but they'll be unmuted in a few minutes so that everybody can talk. And just remember, once we unmute everybody, you'll need to mute yourself locally or just be quiet, because we'll be able to hear everything that's going on where you are. And then there's also a chance to type in questions. We probably won't need that box because you'll be able to just talk to each other. But just in case, I'll make reference to the fact that there is a chat box where you can send us messages if you need to, or you know, if something's not working right and you need to send a chat, you can do that. Or if you do want to type in a question, that's okay. But like I said, you should be able to just talk to each other in just a couple of minutes after we've gone through a few more slides. I just wanted to go back real quick and just refresh our memories of asset management as a concept, and remind everybody that, again, we had 5 core components, and we went through each of these through the training, where we talked about the current state of the assets, where we got into what you owned, where it was located, what condition it was in, the useful life, the replacement cost. And so it was basically a chance for you to inventory everything that made up your system. In our training, we broke that down into one specific type of asset or one area of your system. But when you do asset management overall, it's all the assets that make up your system. Then we talked about level of service. This is where you set goals for what you want your assets to do, what kind of service you want to provide the public, that type of thing. Then we had criticality, and criticality was where we got into the concept that not all assets are equally important to us. Assets that are likely to fail and have a bad consequence have a much higher risk for our operation. So those are our high-risk assets. So we ranked them from, say, 1 to 5 on probability of failure and 1 to 5 on consequence of failure. And those assets that were high on both would be your high-risk assets and would be ones that you would be looking to do some maintenance on or some repairs, replacement, whatever you needed to do to keep those assets in working order. Sorry about that. There's a glitch in this, a glitch that makes it do that every now and again. The fourth part is life cycle costing, and that's where we get into the operation and maintenance of our assets and the repair, replacement, rehabilitation. So once an asset fails, how are we going to handle the failure? What type of activity are we going to do? And then finally, our funding. So our funding gets into the day-to-day monies that we need to operate and maintain our facilities, and then what do we need to repair, replace, or rehabilitate our facilities long-term, so the capital expenses and the operating expenses. If you recall on Workshop 4, the asset management applied activity that we were looking at got into the repair rehabilitation component and then a little bit into the funding component. So what we talked about doing was for the assets that you included in your asset inventory, so again this would be a subset of the whole system, so you might have done meters or hydrants or valves or something like that. We were going to have you look at the class of asset, what types of repair options you had, what types of rehabilitation options and replacement, because if we remembered, not every asset had the ability to do repair, rehabilitation, replacement. Sometimes you have really no option, you just have to replace. Sometimes you can't rehabilitate, and sometimes repair is better. So it was just sort of looking at your class of assets and saying, you know, which ones had the ability to be repaired, rehabilitated, or replaced. And then we looked at the next item was looking at a short-term, long-term replacement schedule. So we would list the asset on the table, what was the criticality, high, medium, or low, or you could have used the actual number, criticality number. Then the date of your anticipated replacement for that asset, and whether it was a short-term replacement meaning you needed it in the next 10 years, or a longer-term replacement meaning it was more than 10 years, and what was your estimated replacement cost. And then we went to another table that used the information on the table we just generated to say what would be the cost per year of the replacements. So you might have two valves or two hydrants or 2 meters or whatever it is that needed to be replaced in 2017. So we'd put that year in there, put the assets, and then the total cost for the year, and you could just add up all of the items in your previous table by year to kind of get a sense for how much money you needed per year. Then we talked in question 3, looking at the funding, you know, what story would you tell about why you needed funding, what would happen without the funding, you know, how would you tell your bosses, and that kind of thing. And then the last 2 questions were kind of our standard questions of, did you have any difficulties, did you have any successes, you know, how did it go? So I put on the screen a slide that is related to the report out, so just, you know, remind us of the asset class you were working on, talk about the activities you did for applied activity 4, or I think we may have even some that go back a little further, that's fine. Just talk about whatever activities you did. And then talk about what you learned through the process. So just as an overall activity, what kind of things were you able to learn from doing the asset management? And it could be stuff that relates to the class you did, or it could be just stuff overall about your utility, things you learned about how you're functioning, or what improvements you might need to make in processes or whatever. So just anything that you learned through the process would be really helpful. So at this point I think we can unmute the phone line. So again, remember that we'll be able to hear anything you're saying, so if you need to mute your phone locally before you start talking, that's fine. Okay, I'm unmuted. Okay, I think everybody is unmuted now. So we should have John, Karen, and Elizabeth on to share. And I know John had some slides to share. So John, if you're on, can you say hello just so we know you're there?
Yes, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. And then Elizabeth, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, and Karen, are you there? Oh, is Greg there?
Yep, Greg's here.
Okay, and is Greg on instead of Karen? Or are we expecting another person? Okay, so we have, is there anybody else besides John, Karen, and Greg? Okay, and I should have mentioned, we also have Allison Murphy on from Vermont, and then I don't know, did Jim Siriano join us yet?
He has not made it back yet.
Okay, so Jim will probably join us at some point, but Allison is on from Vermont, and then James is on just helping out with the webinar. So John, if you wanted to go first, we can bring up your slides and you can tell us about your activity.
Yep. So, that slide right there. So initially I did commercial water meters, and I did send you that one. It's a fairly involved spreadsheet, but since then I've moved on to more of the attributes for the water lines and the mainline gate valves and pressure reducing vaults, which I have 7 of them here in Winooski. The prioritization that you're looking at here, so out of all the streets in the city, I've taken the worst of the worst, the ones that through this whole exercise of asset management have been prioritized of where we should expend our efforts. So of those, there's about 11 streets, I think there's one on the other page, I've since ranked those as well and submitted that to the drinking water SRF priority list so that we can potentially get funding, low interest loans for replacement of some of these streets. So this is 2018 effort, more than likely. So as you scroll down through, you'll see the streets, and the next slide should be mainline valves, isolation valves. Go back one. There you go. So those are some of the worst, the ones that we found that were not functioning or were leaking when we operated them. So I hit risk on those. And then the next slide is the pressure reducing vaults. Tried to rank those as to what ones might be better to try and get after first.
And that first list that you had there was actually the pipes, is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Those are actual water lines. So from this risk, I've generated a CIP. So I've got annual cost of water line replacement, mainline valve replacement. There's actually a line item in there for hydrants and pressure reducing vaults and curb stops.
Great.
So each year until 2027, I've extended out what I think I've got to set aside in a capital reserve to fund this effort of a certain number of them or a certain number of feet per year. And that's just the water. I did it for stormwater, and I did it for sewer lines as well. And then we're going to get into the vertical assets after that, which would be the wastewater plant and fleet and things of that nature. So that was what I've been focusing on since last class.
That's fantastic. And what kind of numbers were you coming up with for your CIP? I mean, are you talking about, tens of thousands per year, hundreds of thousands per year, or millions per year? What kind of level, funding-wise, were you kind of looking at?
Yeah, I think the the gist was a couple of fire hydrants a year, so about $5,000 to $6,000 per year to start replacing some of these 1940, 1950-year-old hydrants. Curb stops might be a little aggressive at $20,000, but when you start getting into them, it doesn't take long to burn up $5,000 if you're doing a replacement. So That I've got at 25 a year. Mainline valves is 23,000 a year. This is going out to 27, and then about $120,000 for water line replacements. That wouldn't be, that would be just through the operating budget, of course, through the capital plan. But that's not looking at a major replacement like I would have put on for like a bond through the prior year. Yep. So that gives you some sense of the dollars.
Yeah, and so the ones that you're talking about, just to reiterate, these would be things you're doing in your regular, your regular operating budget, and then when you're wanting to do a bigger project, that would be more SRF or some other kind of funding.
Correct.
That's great. Fantastic. So I almost don't even have to ask this, what you learned, because it seems like you learned a lot. But what would you consider to be, the most positive things you got out of the process, or what did you feel like, really helped your utility out of doing the asset management?
The timeliness of the course was probably spot on, because we were in a process of the RFP of an asset management software program. So we're 3 weeks from implementing that. So I've been working with the company to develop all the screen, the dashboard, all the attributes that we would be looking for. And I also had a master plan done, a hydraulic model from one of the area consultants. So that really dovetailed into being able to quickly isolate out what lines, so this was not only me. This was a fairly big group effort. I've had an intern from UVM working with us to develop and to start really drilling into the mainline valve books and the curb stop valve books and those water lines. So it really is all inclusive, and it all kind of came down at the same time. So just being able to dedicate not only an intern but myself, when I have time, to doing real focused projects with a little bit of help from the course really played in nicely for us.
Great. And what software did you end up going with for your asset inventory?
Yeah, we looked at 4 different software programs: the Beehive, the WebEx. We ended up with NextGen. They're a group out of Sacramento.
Okay.
They're not really a module based. It's much more of a open platform, if you will, for this. And so it'll all be everything but the financial is going to go into this. So all of our fleet, we don't have anything now, so we're really not starting and throwing anything away. We're not really starting again. So it is a real learning curve, but it's kind of exciting in the fact that we've got no bad habits already, or we didn't expend a lot of money on anything already, so we can start new.
That's great. And does it also include work order system?
Yeah, service requests and work orders. So it's it's a pretty it's a $50,000 program.
So pretty significant investment.
Yeah, I would say it is. So it's citywide, meaning the some of the code enforcement folks are going to be using it. All the DPW, the water, the sewer, so it's department-wide. So we spread the cost out. It's about $6,000 a year for maintaining it. So it's been a all-inclusive project.
Great, fantastic. So I'll open it up to questions from anybody else on the phone. Allison or anybody else, if you have questions for John, please have at it.
John, how well does NextGen play with GIS and Excel? Can you upload and import easily?
Yeah, we right now the RPC here in Chittenden County hosts our GIS. So we've been working hand in glove with them in order to get two-way communication with the software. But as a host, you can imagine that they're a little reticent to open up their files to an outside contractor. So we've figured out a way that we can just upload each month any changes into the GIS, and so that's worked out pretty well. And they do import and export Excel just fine. You know, none of these all these companies are going to do what you need them to do. They're all code writers. They're not. They're certainly the brightest and the best in the industry. So it's. I don't think you can go wrong with any asset management program. It's just really what you want to put into it and how much you want it to do.
And it's server based, so anyone from the city can log on and see it?
I'm sorry, it's what based?
Server based or cloud based? So
oh, it's cloud. Yeah, no, it's cloud based. Yep, it is limited by number of users. There is a 1 to 4 user and then a 4 to 7 user price, and we're going to start out with a 1 to 4. I've got two dedicated iPads for field use, and then the folks at City Hall, there'll be one at the front counter for service requests that come in from customers, so we can follow a customer complaint where it gets dedicated to and how we close that loop. And so then of course the Public Works will have access, and hopefully we won't trip over each other using it. I kind of think 4 people is good to start with, but we may find that we need to grow, and we can.
okay.
Oh, John, Elizabeth here. I got a quick question. Was the cost, it wasn't based only on users, or was it based only on users, or is it based on, I don't know, a certain amount of data to be generated from all the different departments?
Yeah, they again, it's not module based, it's open, so I didn't buy it for just a wastewater module and a street module, and so it's kind of geared towards your size, but they don't sell it that way. I mean, we told them what our population is. I think it's the price is the price. They're not. It has no bearing, but it is on how much open. What is it that you're going to use it for, and they build it to suit. But so without the financial end of it, it was cheaper. If I didn't want to use the parks or the trees or the lighting module, or not modules, but those entities, I didn't pay for them. But you can always add them later, and they just serially charge you. So it's a pretty broad-based one that I chose, and it's but we can always expand on it. But that was when I say 50, it was 38,000, I believe, is what the cost of the software was, and then all the implementation and his training is rolled into that. But if you want X more, you pay X more, and so it is kind of tailored. Elizabeth, what the heck are you doing working? I figured you'd be skiing today.
No, that'll be tomorrow, thank you.
Yeah. Good to know you still got that powder clause in your contract.
Yeah, I pulled it on Monday, but all the lifts were closed due to wind.
John, I got a question for you here. It's Greg from Burlington.
Hey, Greg.
For the consequence failure for your pipes, did you take into consideration if there were upcoming street paving projects or any other kind of capital roadway projects in Winooski? That's something we're dealing with here now in Burlington. It's not just what's going on with the water line and whether just the consequence of the line itself, but in the context of there's the regular street paving program. There's now we have this, it's called Great Streets, where they're redoing the downtown core as a separate project. I didn't know if those factored into your consequence of failure analysis, anything like that.
Right. Well, that's that's kind of a nice thing about it, Greg, is your consequence of failure would be different than mine. If a street, or maybe a street's not a great example, or a water line, but maybe even a sewer line, a break that's near a waterway is going to obviously risk higher than a small one that's on a flat area that's really not going to create damage. Or if an AC water line bursts, what kind of damage is going to occur. So it's not only just age and condition, and so it's that's the nice thing about it. Your 1 through 5 may not be the same as my 1 through 5 because of your complete street rebuild. I didn't weigh it in because it doesn't. It's kind of a moving target. What is the main street going to? What's the street going to be in as far as the public works is concerned? I try to dovetail with them so that I'm rebuilding the water line or the sewer line ahead of the paving or the curving or the street walk or the sidewalk rather. But yeah, that's a sticky wicket. It's not. There's no good answer to that really. I think it's just the person you have doing your criticality should be almost the same person who's creating your CIP for what streets you're going to do.
Yeah.
John, how many people did you have involved in the ranking process, like choosing the 1 to 5? Was it just yourself, or did you have a team that sat down and did that?
Yeah, no, it's a good idea to have, because everybody brings a little something different to the table, and having, myself might be ambiguous. Plus, the whole idea of this is that I can take it to council and say, this is just not my opinion. This is, this ranking was come up with. So it wasn't only the consultant that we hired to do the master study, or the intern that I had to helping me do the asset management work, or myself, but it was also folks in public works that are looking at it from maybe a street work standpoint. So there was a group of 4.
Okay. And did you present any of your results to your council yet? And if so, what was their reaction to what you did?
Yeah, I sure did. Actually, I put together a PowerPoint presentation last month at one of the council meetings, and they were just, I could tell that they didn't have a whole lot of questions. They just were nodding between each other because we had forewarned them that we were buying this, and this was going to be the intent. And luckily I had at least just the water side of it done so that I could float it into a CIP spreadsheet so that they could see the result, even though it was just a snippet of town. But I had like a GIS map of breaks, a GIS map of commercial users, a GIS map of age of relative to size of pipe, age of pipe, what pipe had already been cement lined, cast iron, or what types of pipes. So they were blown away.
So lots of visuals, it sounds like.
Oh, sure, yeah. That was the whole intent. Plus, I wanted to give them the schedule of implementation for the asset management and just what the next steps were. So because we have been working on this capital investment plan for some time. The financial side has always had it, and we've always been using something, but it was never really risk-based.
Great. Any other questions for John? Okay, let's see. Who wants to go next?
Well, I've got to say that, you know, my particular asset class was, you know, not very conducive to developing, you know, any kind of long-range planning on, because the cost, the replacement cost, not that great. You know, you can almost work out of your budget on that, and at least you can anticipate within a certain time frame that, you know, 1 or 2 of these go in the next, you know, 5 to 10 years, but the cost implications aren't that great. So I didn't really, all my consequences of failure, probability of failure were, and the risks were all very low. So I guess all I can say is, frankly, John, I think you did a wonderful job. That's very awesome little presentation there. And what I look forward to is actually taking a closer look at our capital improvement, which, frankly, a lot of it is on, you know, dovetailing with street projects. And as we, you know, do our asset inventory and get it all mapped, I think, you know, it's going to help bring together what's necessary to, you know, come up with a more detailed capital improvement plan than what the town has in place.
Okay. And in terms of what you learned through the process, I mean, did you feel like you learned things that you could apply to doing that bigger capital improvement plan in the future?
Oh, sure. And the other thing I'd like to take a look at is like, you know, the program that John used, he mentioned Next Gen, the one he got, but it would be nice to have some more resources to look at. I'm sure some of these programs, depending upon the size of the community and the other departments that might be able to utilize it, I think, you know, more departments within the town need to buy into the idea of asset management to make that work. So I look forward to trying to see what there is out there. It will be useful to the highway department and the buildings and grounds. So I think that's where we're going.
That sounds great. And then you can always consider like a request for proposals too, once you get to what it is you want to have the asset management program do and how many departments. You could put out an RFP just to see what's out there, because there are, you know, as you alluded to, there are quite a few asset management programs on the market. So there's a lot of different programs that do a lot of different things, and you know, if you put out an RFP and kind of just let people know what you want, you might get quite a few people responding and give you some chance to look at the different kind of approaches that might be out there.
Weren't you going to provide us a list of some of those different programs or companies by these?
We can. I mean, there's so many, but we can put together a list to get you started. I mean, it wouldn't be anything ranked in terms of, you know, how good it is or anything like that, but we could provide you a list of some example programs that you could look at.
Well, you know, what I'm thinking of is you've offered this type of training all around the country. I'm just thinking that you might have a little better resources and feedback. People like John, who, you know, he found the program that worked for his community, and so I'm just thinking that you must have, you know,
Yeah, but the problem we ran into is we did used to have a list exactly like what you're talking about. The problem was keeping it up to date, because there's so many companies out there and they're just adding to the list all the time. And then we have to be a little careful that we don't want to endorse one product over another. So, I have no problem with, systems talking to each other. I think that's the best way to do it. So we just have to be a little cautious that we don't provide anything that says we're favoring this person over that person, because one city's use of it might be different than another city's use. But we kind of stopped keeping up the list just because it was so difficult, but we can provide you, at least based on things we've heard about from different utilities and seen, and companies we've talked to, we can at least provide you some places to get started. But it wouldn't be an all-exhaustive list because it's an almost impossible target to hit because there are just so many companies out there.
Yeah, I understand that. And the other concern I have is, I guess there's a fair amount of research you have to go into when you start narrowing down
right
who you're going to go with, because if there's so many, that's who's going to still be here 10 years to support you.
Exactly. That is a consideration, whether it can be supported long term, is the data something that if that company were to go away, you could dump that data into another program and, like in an Excel table or something to get it exported into something else, or is it data that, is kind of stuck if that company goes out of business or out of luck? So I think those are considerations that you have to think about as you're going forward.
So, John, I got a question on how did you narrow your search down to this next gen? John, are you still with us?
Sorry, I went skiing. No, I'm here.
Old Valley.
He said, I'm done, I'm out of here. The slopes are calling.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, I'm on the chairlift now. Sorry. So yeah, we narrowed the list down from, and I will give you 5 companies. But if you query asset management companies, you're going to find a pretty good sized list. But Manager Plus, CityWorks, Lucity, Beehive, and NextGen are the ones that we looked at seriously.
Yeah,
and
the thing that I missed one. I got Manager Plus, CityWorks, and there was one after that.
Yeah, Lucity, Lucity.
Okay.
They were a strong company, as was Beehive. The thing that pushes us over is the municipal experience. The guy that developed NextGen worked with municipalities mainly, and it wasn't, a lot of these other companies have adapted a private enterprise asset management to incorporate municipal, the things that we use, the jargon, all the pipes and, vertical, or excuse me, horizontal stuff. So, I think you can't really go wrong, but you can probably limit yourself. So the RFP, I'd be happy to send you our RFP. Also, anybody who'd want it, and it doesn't really separate, I don't think, the wheat from the chaff, but what it kind of does is tell them what we're looking for, and to respond to the pertinent questions that we have. So the easy answer is, you just look them up and you go on their dashboards and you kind of see, you play around online and see what the feel is. But the more difficult answer is again drilling into what it is that you want to get out of it and what they have to offer. But and you do have to be a little bit careful. I mean, we asked a couple of these companies right out, is you've been in business since 2005. Where do you see yourself in the next 10 to 15 years? Because that's it's an investment that you're making, and you don't want them to go away and you to be left without any management of your system.
Yeah, I guess what I'm going to be looking for is how they can tie into what we're developing as a, in our GIS database.
Yeah, I think, like I said, these guys are all code writers. They're gonna be able to. You might have to grab a cell and put it into their specific spreadsheet cell so that it lines up. But the whole implementation, that's the exercise, is importing data. And it's
right.
If you have a passel of data and different software that houses that data, it gets a little more complicated. But these people are smart. This is what they do for a living.
Yeah.
And I think some of the softwares are more GIS spatial based, and some of them are more traditional look, like a spreadsheet sort of a look, or a data input table sort of a look. So you kind of just have to decide if you're, like the CityWorks, I believe, is a little more spatially based.
Yeah, it's very GIS centric. I know, John, you listed Manager Plus. That happens to be one of the asset management programs that we use here in Burlington. It's what is used at the treatment plant here, the water treatment plant, should I say. And there's no map-centric component to it, which is fine for a treatment plant. But if you were trying to expand using that program for the collection system, per se, you would probably, there's limitations or what that program could do for that. So it's all dependent on how big your system is, what it is you're actually managing, whether it's just a plant or your distribution system or anything like that. So that's been my experience, at least, seeing. So,
no, that's exactly right. You gotta know what you want to get out of it to some degree, and then go searching.
Yep.
And that's kind of when we talked about the picking the software. That was one of the first things we talked about. Is you have to know the end game before you can decide what you want. So that it's really, really important to know what do you hope to have at the end, because that will set which groups or which companies can do what you want to do. So, there's so many options. You got to make sure that they can do what it is you want rather than you're doing what they want. And I think, your point about some of these things have been adapted from, the private sector. You can see that sometimes in the software where it came from another world and it's being adapted to the water world, and sometimes that can be great and sometimes it doesn't work out so well. So you kind of have to just decide how well it fits your needs. Do anybody have any other questions for Elizabeth? Okay, I think, Greg, you're holding the short straw.
Well, I didn't do a whole lot with we were focusing on water system valves. I guess the only really work I've done since our last meeting up there in Montpelier was I had some guys from our distribution crew going back through old paperwork orders and entering those work orders into the GIS, tying those to asset IDs, and at this point we've narrowed down. I think we've gone back to probably 2008, 2007 with work orders. So I have been able to identify valves that have been repaired or replaced within the last, what is that, almost 10 years now, and to identify those for a potential rehab program, or at least making a map of where all those valves are so that our guys could exercise them and schedule them as needed specifically. But I guess more on a project level, I had gone through a similar process to what John did in Winooski with water mains for a large area. This project came through probably a couple weeks after we had our classes out there in Montpelier. But the mayor's office has been looking at this district heating project idea of getting heat from our McNeil station, our plant, down to the downtown area, and was asking our department, what streets would we likely be digging up in this very wide area within the next 10 years, and we kind of threw our hands up in the air and said we're not 100% sure. So I did do some consequence of failure and probability of failure analysis in this just sections of the city to at least give them some idea of, okay, if we were going to be digging on any one of these streets, these would be the most likely. So that's sort of where I've been doing some asset management work within the last month. But
and when you did that process, did you find that there were a lot of places that you expected you were going to have to dig up based on the risk ranking, or just a few places, or how did those results come out?
The results came out, well, it's the old north end of Burlington, so so are the utilities. Yeah, there's a fair number of streets and pipe segments that had a high risk score based on use for consequence of failure was diameter, the road class that it was associated with, whether it was a class 1, class 2, or class 3, and then proximity to a critical customer, and then the likelihood using break history, which is really only coming from, like I said, the last 10 years of data that we had been putting in from work orders, and then pipe age. So I think there could be more factors put in, or tinkering of those weights that could affect the overall scores. But yeah, I mean, we certainly saw some streets pop out at us that, if we decided we had to dig there, or this project wanted to dig and replace or install whatever it is, this conduit they use to do district heating, that we identified some streets that would be good candidates to replace the water line at the same time.
What was the response from your upper management when you kind of presented that information? What was their response to it?
They were impressed, and it was tied to the GIS, so it clearly gave a good visual of that. But yeah, I still think those meetings are going on. So, and I had the words, and direction from that project haven't really come back to me yet. So, but overall, a good response from upper management.
One suggestion I would have for you that will help you with learning how to improve the risk ranking process later on would be to look at the risk ranking that you have right now and kind of print it out and store it somewhere exactly as is. And then watch what happens to those pipes that are in the risk ranking over the next 5 to 10 years. So some of them, maybe you replace them. So when you replace them, if they could even take out a chunk of pipe. Sometimes people don't dig the whole pipe out, they just kind of abandon in place. But what would be nice is if you could take a coupon or something out of that pipe, see what it looks like, compare it to what you ranked it, does it make sense, watch the pipes that don't get replaced and say, were the ones that you thought were most likely to fail, are they the ones where you saw failures? So just for a learning process over the next 1 year, 5 years, 10-year time period, if you just sort of look at what you ranked today and what happens, you can start to look for other factors you might want to add in the future. So it can help inform, hey, these 3 pipes broke right away and we had them at a low probability of failure. I wonder why. Did we miss something, like they were a certain pipe type that was more likely to fail than these other ones, and we didn't put pipe type in there as a factor. So just as a learning experience, I think you're off to a great start. And then just, again, as a learning experience, kind of, capture this moment of time, because you will probably change your risk ranking as you go forward. But
Yeah.
just use it as sort of a learning opportunity to say, well, what does happen going forward? You know, which pipes did we replace? Which ones failed? Which ones did I think were high failure probability but didn't? You know, just to try to, you know, kind of see how close you were in guessing which ones were, because it's really an educated guess. I mean, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. You can't see your pipes. You can't get all the information you would like. So you're kind of using your best educated guess, and then to make it better, you just sort of watch what happens over time and see, you know, start making comparisons. And you know, maybe they take out a pipe and they get a coupon and the pipe is horrible condition, and it's like, hey, we're right on. This pipe is, you know, really showing signs of wear and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I know for one, the biggest one I was kind of struggling with is trying to get a factor in soil information into this analysis, which is just not really there for an urban, at least spatially. This just wasn't there for like most of downtown Burlington and whatnot. Because the more failures we're seeing with water mains is, and our engineers are pointing their fingers towards the soil and saying it's more often than not it's a soil or bedding issue as opposed to the age or material or anything like that. So.
And I was going to say that's probably likely that soils do play a role, and you may find that more outside like a downtown core area, like maybe you have more ability to get into soil types. I think some of the, do you guys have the Soil and Water Conservation Service in Vermont?
I'm not sure.
Because I know out in New Mexico they actually do soil maps that you can get, and they're already GIS based and you can overlay them, but I don't know if Vermont has such a thing, but you could check to see if there is such an organization. Allison, do you know if there's a Soil and Water Conservation Commission in Vermont?
I'm racking my brain. I am not as familiar with Vermont's soil classification and any maps that exist, but I can check down with waste management and the geology folks and see, because there's been a lot of work. I know there's been a lot of work recently with PFOA and when they were trying to figure out how it was traveling. So I'll check in with them and I'll get back to you.
Because there may be somebody who does that in your state. I just don't know if they're more of a Western thing, but I know out here you can get maps that will show you soil types and, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that exists in Vermont, but that could be helpful to overlay. Or you might find that, you know, the amount of traffic over the pipe. I mean, I would agree that age is probably not your best indicator. It's kind of a proxy to other things. Like degradation tends to occur over time, so age is sort of a proxy for the degradation that might be occurring. But other factors probably are more prominent, like, you know, the amount of heavy traffic over the pipe, depth of various soil types, installation. It's just that we don't always know that kind of information. But as you identify those kinds of factors, something you can do, again, going forward, is if you're doing a project, a new one, you can collect a lot more of that information. Like you would know if somebody's taking pictures of how it was installed, you would have a lot more information about the bedding and installation process. And if they were right there on site, you know, maybe there's somebody that could tell, at least generally speaking, what kind of soils it was. So you can collect that information going forward so that at some point in the future that could be part of your analysis.
Right.
Any other questions for Greg?
Greg, John here. How did you go about your mainline valve evaluation? I know you clearly have quite a few more intersections than Winooski has, so you probably have 3 or 4 valves at each. Did you do, so you went back into old work orders or your records and determined maintenance logs and then put that all into like an access spreadsheet, or how did you go about evaluating those mainline valves?
Actually, just made like an online using our ArcGIS online enterprise license, sort of a web map where the guys could, because at old paper work orders, all they either had was an address, or sometimes they didn't even have an address. They just have a street name. So the guys could go with an online map, look through whatever information was on the paperwork order, correlate it to the GIS, put a dot on the map whether it was a valve repair or a water main break, whatever it was, put a dot over where that point is, and enter the work order information and the asset ID from the GIS. So I mean, I didn't get down to valve itself, valve's criticality, which is something I will be likely doing in the next couple months, identifying what are the critical valves in our system. But at this point, it was just identifying what valves have had work history. If that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's how many valves do you have in town?
Oh boy, I don't know.
That many, huh?
I had, boy, I don't even know.
Would it be in the thousands?
It's got to be.
Pull something up right now.
Oh, I've got 640, so he's got to have a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at this point, it's I know I think there's certain software packages and things that can do the actual criticality analysis for you, but hold on a second here. I can tell you roughly what we got.
So in your mainline valve map book, are you saying that you've got Google Map of each intersection at this point?
We should have all mainline valves mapped, yes, in GIS. So if I'm looking here, I got my attribute table. Oh, I don't even know count. Let's see.
It's not super important. Obviously, it's a large project.
I mean, on my attribute table, it gives me the star greater than 2,000. So.
Okay, so thousands, which is kind of what I would have expected.
Yeah, I got
big numbers.
Yeah, about 3,400.
And I would think that work you're doing on the work orders for the last 10 years would really help inform that probability of failure score. That's going to help give you some information on, how they've been performing in the past and what kinds of, issues you've had and that sort of thing. Do you know when they've had a problem at the valve, are they typically just replacing it with a new one, or are they actually making repairs and leaving the old valve there?
There are instances where they are just replacing the stuffing, or whatever is inside the valve. They're just making a repair to it. I've seen work orders say that, but I'd say more often than not, you're already in there with the with the pit open. Might as well just replace it. I don't know. I haven't really looked at the cost difference between the replace and repair by the time you're digging the hole and whatnot, but. I have seen both.
Okay, yeah, because I've seen some utilities, and it probably depends a little bit on size and depth and that kind of thing, but some utilities just replace a valve anytime it's broken, and others do, some kind of repair. So that would help you as well, because if it's a brand new valve, going back to your work order system, maybe they replaced it 2 or 3 years ago, and that would be a different probability of failure than,
Yeah.
something else. So I think that could really help you as you're going through your POF scores. That would give you a lot of good information.
Yeah. I have been also trying to include with those work order things now, moving forward, when we have breaks or repairs or whatever. There's actually, when they fill out that online work order map, there's an attribute in there whether if it say it was a main break or a service break, there's an attribute whether valves worked or valves did not work, whether it was 100% shutdown or some other smaller rate of water shutting down through a valve. So
that's great information.
After that information, and just honestly, it's coming down to doing a short 5-minute debriefing with whoever was doing the work, and looking at the map and saying, yeah, this valve had a rounded nut, or this valve had didn't shut down all the way, so we had to go next intersection down. So trying to capture all that information.
Well, that's fantastic. It sounds like you're really getting some good information. That's great. One suggestion on the criticality of failure with valves, since one of the things you want to know is if this one doesn't work, will the ones next to me work? So the consequence is higher if the ones beside it don't work, because then you've lost your redundancy. So if you have a way spatially to kind of say, this valve is surrounded by a bunch of valves that we expect to fail, that could raise your consequence of failure number, because you're sort of anticipating that when this one fails, the next set out might also fail. And I think one of the meetings you guys talked about an event that you had to shut down, like what was it, like 25 valves or something before it actually shut off, because it was just, you had to keep moving out further and further. So when you see those situations, you could use that as part of your consequence of failure score.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Greg? Okay, so just a couple of closing thoughts. So just a couple things on next steps of what you can do and going from here. Many of you have already moved on to this, but one thing you can do, we kind of had you focus on one particular type of asset or location of assets, and you can do, you can go step by step and do a different set, or you can kind of take on the whole thing, tackle it all at once, however you want to do it, but basically taking the same thought process and applying it to other assets. And certainly John went way into that, and it sounds like Greg is going that direction, as is Elizabeth, so you're all kind of moving that way. But the intent was always like just learn it in a small, more manageable set of assets and then apply it kind of across the board, either step by step, looking at different classes, or depending on your time availability, you can kind of do it all at once. It just depends on how much time you have, but certainly the idea is to use the same thought process but just apply it to other assets. And I wanted to mention, I think all of you may have had, I'm not sure about Burlington, but there are those asset management funding grants available through Vermont. So, Allison and Jim can certainly provide you any information if you want to get another one to do some more asset management work or something like that. Just keep that in mind, that that is a good source of funding for asset management and can help you move forward with your asset management program. So just a reminder that that funding source is there for you. And then similar to what John talked about, you can use your asset inventory information to develop that long-term capital plan. And so, that's a great direction to go. Once you know what you need to replace and when you need to replace it, it really helps you determine that long-term plan. And then, as John mentioned, there's some amount that you might be able to do through your normal day-to-day collection of rates, and then there's others that maybe you want to get an outside funding source like the SRF program or the RD program or something, CDBG. So once you have that long-term capital program, you can start to make those choices of how much do I put in my annual regular budget and how much do I save for a capital project that's much larger and that, you know, may be funded through bonds or funded through an SRF loan or some other way. But that's a great thing to do with your asset inventories, is develop that long-term capital program. And then I did make mention before that we were doing these case study write-ups. One of them, an example, is shown there. This was actually Bennington from round 1. But we are working on these case studies. We have not forgotten about you. It's just a lengthy process, and I have one of my employees working on this for me. So she is busily writing up these case studies, and at some point she probably will contact you guys for additional information to kind of add to the case studies. So that is going on, and hopefully we'll be able to finish that up pretty soon here, but we are still working on those and have several of them in different stages of completion. So that's happening. And then kind of right before we wrap up here, are there any, you know, questions, final comments, concerns, anything like that that you'd like to share before we wrap up? Okay, if not, I'll just put my contact information up there again. The one action item for me out of this is to look for at least some kind of list for you, Elizabeth. You got a couple of names today, but we'll try to see if we can put a few more together of some of the companies that are out there to just get you some thoughts about it, knowing that it isn't going to be all exhaustive, but at least it would give you some ideas of companies that people have used that we've heard about. And then I think Allison was going to check on the soil type information. And then James, I think you said there was an agency you looked up. Who did you look up?
Yeah, it looked like the USDA might have some of that information available, and you might also want to check with some of the local universities. A lot of times, I know for New Mexico, for example, UNM has a huge repository of GIS maps of all sorts of types.
So there may be some good mapping information out there for you. Allison, do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
Just thank you for participating and showing up today. We appreciate all your effort. We know you have full-time jobs, so this is a lot. It can be a lot of work. So we appreciate your efforts, and thank you, Heather, and thank you, James, for the technical support.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you guys as well, because you know, especially the state of Vermont for providing us with the resources. You know, you said it, we are very busy, and to have a program available to help us develop our inventory and you know, get things rolling, it's I can't tell you how helpful that is to us as a small community.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing that Elizabeth said. You know, the format of this course was kind of beneficial. That applied activities were a pain, but you know, they also drove you to do your homework, and you know, your homework is your job, so to speak, or it could be. So good. It's a good scenario for us, I think.
Just remember, we called them applied activities so they wouldn't be as bad as homework. We're trying to avoid that. Right? Yeah, we're trying to avoid that dreaded word of homework. Kind of forces you to actually think about things, but I'm just really excited about the direction you guys are going. I mean, it seems like you're really taking what we learned and really taking it much further, which is, you know, always our hope, that you start kind of small and then expand. And, you know, John, the kind of stuff you're doing with sharing that information with your elected officials, and Greg, you even talked about sharing some of this information with your upper management. It really helps when you have actual data, pictures, maps, you know, to tell your story with real world stuff, I think really helps you get that support you need to get the funding for, you know, a major capital project, or even what you want to put in your budget for pipe replacement, valve replacements, whatever. So it's really exciting to see the direction you're going, and that's, you know, I applaud you guys for heading in that direction.
Please reach out to us, email me or call me and let me know if you have suggestions on how we move forward. We're trying to listen and adjust our approach as we get feedback.
Will do.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we'll end it there. Just as an FYI, we are doing another webinar tomorrow with our friends in Rutland. And if you are interested, we will have that recorded and you can listen to what they have to say if you have an interest in what's going on there. So just FYI, or if you want to listen in, you know, let us know. We can send you the link to that webinar. You certainly don't need to, but if anybody has an interest in doing that, you know, just let us know. We're happy to share the link for the one tomorrow. I think tomorrow's is at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So we have to get up extra early tomorrow. But if like I said, if anybody's interested, just let us know, or later on we'll have a recording of it if anybody wants to hear what's happening in Rutland. But with that, thank you all for being on today. We really appreciate your attendance and participation. Stay warm and stay safe, and keep us posted on your asset management activities. If you have questions or comments or whatever, we're happy to try to help however we can. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.